Let's do that hockey.
Welcome to another episode of Dobber Prospects Radio. I'm your host, Peter Harling, and sorry about the little hiatus here in between episodes. It's been a while, but it's good to be back. If you've been following the Dobber Prospects site, you probably noticed that I recently published this year's first edition of the fantasy ranking for the NHL Draft. This is an article that comes out once or twice a year, and it's pretty much the only one that I know of where you can find a ranking for the upcoming draft that focuses on fantasy hockey. Now, there's lots of places you can go and find different kind of rankings for the draft, but none of them are really more fantasy focused. That's something that needs to be left to your interpretation. So what this article is a consensus. I get a few of the Dobber Prospects draft experts to help me out with this. And then I also outsource to a couple of hockey writer scouts who follow the draft real close. Some guys the likes of Scott Wheeler from The Athletic, Russ Cohen from Hockey Prospect Radio and Sirius XM, Ryan Wagman from McKean's, Steve Ellis from The Hockey News, and I'm pleased to be joined right now by Steve Kournianos, the Draft Analyst, and a reoccurring guest on Dobber Prospects Radio. Welcome back to the show, Steve. Good to have you on, man.
Thanks. Always great to be on, Pete.
Yeah, so what I do is I get everyone to give me their fantasy rankings for the first round of the draft, and then I kind of figure out what the consensus overall rankings for this is, and it's all based on fantasy hockey, as I mentioned. And this year's draft is a unique one from the last several that we've had. COVID has a lot to do with that, of course, because, you know, there's a bunch of players like Mason McTavish, who hasn't even played a game yet this season. Actually, that's not true. He went over to Switzerland, but the OHL isn't playing. So there's a lot of guys who haven't played a single game, a bunch of guys who only have a handful of games. And then it's also just a different kind of draft where there isn't really a consensus overall first-ranked guy. So, Steve, let's just start with how this year's draft, not even from a fantasy perspective, but how this year's draft is so different from other drafts in the past. And we were talking a little bit before I hit record, trying to come up with some comparisons to drafts gone by that this one is kind of close to. And I think there's like two or three that we really like, maybe the 2014, the 2012 draft, that these ones are kind of similar to. So let's talk about how this year's draft is unique, and there isn't really a consensus number one guy on anyone's list or rankings.
Yeah, that's kind of what makes it unique right off the bat, is that there isn't a consensus number one. I think a lot of us felt it might have been Arttu Räty from Finland, let's say 12 to 14 months ago, and that was all based on the fact that he was, you know, a 16-year-old kid who was playing at the World Juniors for Finland. He was tearing up the U20 league there, the junior circuit. And, you know, we figured, you know, his size, his shot, that he was kind of a two-way physical type, that he played center as well, that he's a pretty good candidate to earmark as a likely consensus number one. And even then, though, people are like, well, there's some other people you got to think about or bring into the conversation. And then, unfortunately for us, you know, Räty kind of struggled a little bit. He was slow to start his junior season, and even with the SM Liga, the adult age league there in Finland, and then he gets left off the Finnish World Junior team after making it a year when he was a year younger. So now it's like, okay, great. Now we have to kind of start all over again. And the thing is, though, like you mentioned, 2012 and 2014. That's exactly what this draft is going to be like. It's going to be either really good, like 2014, which did not have a consensus number one, but still created or turned out like superstar players, you know, Leon Draisaitl and, you know, Nikolai Ehlers and David Pastrnak. You can go up and down that list. The 14 draft was fantastic when it comes to forwards. And all these guys, a lot of those guys drafted in that first round are franchise players for their respective teams right now. The 2012 is the opposite. The similarity to 2012 was that it was a defense-heavy draft. So you get the guys like Morgan Riley and Trouba, but the forwards were not very good. And I think the best forward out of that entire group was Philip Forsberg, and he's good, but he's not a superstar. He's not even a star. And then you had a lot of busts in there, too, with Galchenyuk and so on. So I think, what we really don't know, though, what we're going to get out of this 21 crop, because we know it's defense heavy like 2012. We know there's no consensus number one like 2014. But, the question is, even though there isn't a consensus, is it still going to churn out, let's say, 10 to 15 star NHL players like 2014 did, or is it going to churn out only 4 or 5 really good NHL number 1 and number 2 defensemen like 12 did? And that's really the conundrum. And then maybe you want to throw in, as far as overall depth, you want to compare it to 2017, where 2017 was, we kind of had a consensus number 1 to start, right, in Nolan Patrick. And then he had his injury issues. And then, Nico Hischier had a great World Juniors and a top prospects game. So then he entered the conversation. And then you had that grouping of, Cody Glass and Elias Pettersson, Miro Heiskanen having a strong U18 World Championship tournament, Cale Makar. Like, we knew about those guys. But after that, it was like, I don't know, it was kind of thin. So I think this year's draft class is a little bit of all three. You got the defense heavy, the defense heavy prospects from 2012, the lack of a consensus number 1 like 2014, and the lack of punch or depth outside of the, let's say, top 15 or top 20. All that said, though, we could be completely mistaken, and maybe 5 years from now we're looking at maybe 10 to 15 star players, like I said. Like from 2014, but I use a lot of variables to try to determine that, and on the surface right now it doesn't look like we're going to head that way. I think it's going to be a pretty average draft class without a consensus number 1.
Yeah, it is defense heavy, but there are some really interesting forwards here. Eklund, Kent Johnson, Beniers, Dylan Gunther. Atu Ratu, you already mentioned. So it's not devoid of forwards. I guess for me, I look at the 2014 draft, and it went Aaron Ekblad, Sam Reinhart, Drysdale, Sam Bennett, Michael Dal Cole, Jake Virtanen, and then Hayden Fleury. That's how the draft went. If we redrafted it today, I think it's pretty safe to say that Draisaitl would be number 1 with a bullet. Pasternak maybe would be competitive with that at number 2. Pasternak didn't even go until the end of the first round.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, this draft would have a lot of reshuffling of the selections if it was redone today. But at the time, of course, it didn't look that egregious. There was a lot of players who I thought went right around when they should have. And I don't think anybody at the time was saying, oh my God, what's Calgary doing taking Sam Bennett 4th overall ahead of David Pasternak? Like, no one was saying that then. So with this year's draft, I'm looking at all the players on there, and then I look at all the different rankings that everyone has, and I'm trying to sort out how much of that is weighted because it's just a smaller sample size this year. And it's hard to tell where some of these guys fit in because the OHL hasn't played a single game yet this season. Only a handful of games in the dub have happened. You've got guys who have sat out and haven't played a single game. You've got some guys who traveled at 18, over to Europe, played a few games there, and now they're starting to trickle back into different leagues that are starting to start up, or, they've got that culture shock and adjustment period where they're playing pro hockey in Switzerland or wherever they're playing. It's just kind of crazy. And those guys that are over there, they know that they could be there for anywhere from like 10 games to the balance of the season and play 40 games over there. Like there's just so much unknown about the whole entire season, and the scouts aren't able to go and cover their regions like they maybe normally would, or their region might be blacked out. There might not be any games there. And then it's just a total crapshoot, really. Like, I don't even know what to make of the rankings. Is it because of COVID? Is it because of games played? Or is it just because there's just not a lot of separation between all these players. Like there aren't any generational players who are standing out. Like guys like who I mentioned we've been watching since when they were a kid. I guess the closest one would be Ratu, but he's really cooled off big time this season. He had a really slow start, like you said, getting snubbed for the World Junior team, and it's not like it was a political decision. His play didn't warrant making the team. In order for Finland to ice the most competitive team, it did not include him. But since then, he's been kind of improving a little bit. So yeah, I'm not sure this is a really good year if you're in a rebuilding stage of your fantasy team to be loading up on picks and trying to get a couple franchise players out of this draft to get your fantasy team on track. You think that's a safe assessment?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors that we have to consider that usually, and I know it's kind of like a difference of opinions when it comes to the international tournaments and the prospect showcases, where you say, well, it's a short sample size, so you can't say that this kid's going to be a star based on what he did in 5 games in the middle of February, or what he did at 7 games in the World Juniors, or 6 or 7 games at the Ivan Holinka in August. But now we're learning that those tournaments help. Give us an idea, because especially the Ivan Holinka is such a critical tournament because it's in the beginning of the season. It's in August. It gives Hockey Canada the chance to send their very best. And usually, listen, the majority of the kids drafted come out of Canada, Canadian Major Junior. So you usually get about 35 kids from the OHL that get drafted, about 25 from the Dub, and then maybe another 10 to 15 from the Q. Well, that Ivan Holinka, when they convene for their camp in, let's say, like mid-July, that's a great time because it's the off season. So it gives time for all us draft guys to put the previous draft class in the rear view, the rear view mirror, and then focus on the new crop. And when they have these selection camps and festivals, it's a good way to gauge that. And on top of that, you have the European leagues that start in like late July, mid August, sometime. I know in Russia they do, and so that was completely wiped out. We lost that opportunity, and we had this weird variable this year where the frickin' draft class was the 2020 class was still hadn't yet to be decided, and some of the kids were playing in a new season in the European league, guys like Holtz and Raymond. So it was very odd, very difficult task for a guy like myself who really likes that break. This is the draft was on, let's say, June 21st. It ended. Let me move on to the next class. So not having that international tournament, which would have showcased the likes of, let's say, a Zachary Bolduc or for Team Canada, or let's say a Simon Edmondson for Team Sweden. So all we have to do is go off of older tournaments. And even then you're like, well, none of these kids really dominated. And, I don't like to use the World Juniors to gauge NHL potential, but I do use it to figure out what the quality of the draft class is. And usually if a lot of first year eligibles, so in this case, guys that were born in the year 2003 or late 2002, are invited to the tryout camps, because we all know the World Juniors, right? The coaches want to win, so they want to stack their teams with as many veterans as they can. In this case, veterans being 19-year-old kids, 2 years removed from their initial draft look. But usually you get about 15 to 20 first-year eligibles in a given World Junior tournament, 5 or 6 really big names. Last year, I think 6 of the first 7 picks of the 2020 draft were at the previous World Juniors. And so, this year was different. We didn't have any of that. There wasn't a single, outside of maybe Matthew Beniers, there wasn't, and maybe Walstad, the goalie, but he barely played. There wasn't a single difference maker, first year eligible. All the guys, Olsson from Sweden, Helenius from Finland, Zvozil from the Czech Republic. These guys are good prospects, but they're not like, oh my God, I got to trade everything to get them at the draft. So that was one of the things that just adds to this confusion, and it's where we are today. Even though 80% of the leagues are playing and the kids are active, a lot of the big OHL kids went over to Europe and they're doing really well in places like Slovenia and Slovakia and Switzerland. But yeah, like you said, it's a big unknown, and not having that number one guy at the top to kind of, develop or to create that standard, and then you kind of assess everybody off that standard. It's kind of tough when it comes to ranking people and subsequently projecting NHL players.
Yeah, so let's tuck into it then. Let's look at the rankings and talk about some of the specific players. So first of all, I had 8 people contribute their rankings. As I mentioned, we went through and got a consensus, and there wasn't really an overwhelming consensus for number 1. In drafts past the last several seasons where I've done this, it's been either totally unanimous who the first overall guy was going to be, or it was very consensus as to who the top 3 or 4 players in the draft were. Everyone had like the same top 3 guys almost all the time. And this year it is just the total opposite. So out of the 8 contributors to this, the people who were ranked number 1 are Beniers, and then I had Eklund, and someone else said Beniers, someone said Fabian Lyselle, someone said Owen Power, someone said Jasper Walstad, someone said William Eklund, so like just wide open. And then ranked number 2, you've got Lyselle, Kent Johnson, Brent Clark, William Eklund, Clark, and then Eklund. So out of the top 2 on the rankings, the end result ended up being William Eklund number 1 and Kent Johnson number 2. Kent Johnson didn't receive any votes for number 1, and he ended up the second ranked highest scored player on the consensus rankings, which I find is really interesting.
Yeah.
So for fantasy hockey rankings, again, this ranking is based on fantasy hockey. So I told the writers, points only. So not really taking into consideration too much your peripheral stats like hits and blocks, because not every league counts penalty minutes and plus minus and block shots and all those fun stats, but all of them count goals and assists. So with an emphasis on goals and assists. So the number 1 ranked guy overall was William Eklund. So let's talk a little bit about him. I've not seen a lot of him play because he's over in Europe, but why don't you tell me what your scouting assessment is on Mr. Eklund?
Well, right off the bat, he's a dynamic playmaker. He's a little guy. Well, not that little. He's like about 5'11". I've seen some listings where he's 6 foot. But he's a wing. So just to get that out in the open, he plays for U-Gardens in the Swedish Hockey League, the SHL, and he's been there for about a season and a half. So he was in the J20 Junior League a year ago, or a year and a half ago. I lose track of time with the seasons and everything. And then in the middle of the 1920 season, he finally got promoted up to the parent club. And even though he only had like 1 or 2 points last season, you kind of saw like, all right, this guy's got something going. And we knew of him because he was on Team Sweden at the Ivan Holinka that previous August. I guess it would be August of 2019. And he was at that tournament, and he annihilated it. He destroyed it. He was a buzzsaw. He has obviously a lot of skill, but when a guy collects the puck and he's kind of like doing the Mitch Marner stuff, it stands out. Where he's constantly turning and pivoting and changing direction and eluding pressure and attacking the middle of the ice. And that was a big thing that I saw from Eklund, not just at that Holinka, but also when he was this brand new rookie, inexperienced kid in the SHL in that half season of 2019-20, where he was attacking the middle of the ice. And that means that you have a kid who's fearless. And of course, if you attack the middle of the ice, you have to have the puck skills, the stick handling and puck control and agility to make decisions, from thereafter and get into the traffic and not let the traffic really impede your movement or or impact your decision making. So, heading into the season, I think I had him ranked like 15th. I'm like, you know what? The size thing is still a little bit of a concern because it's the SHL and it's not all that physical compared to North America. And we've always seen a lot of these Swedish kids struggle with that transition, especially the forwards. Well, this year with U-Gardens, he was on the third line. And his winger was Alexander Holtz. He played with Alexander Holtz, who's a top pick of the Devils last year. Holtz being the sniper finishing type. Well, they're on the same line last year. There were games I watched because of Holtz where I'm like, dude, friggin' Eklund is driving that line as a left wing. And so fast forward to this season, not only is he driving that line, I mean, he's probably one of the best under, I would say, 24, 25 players in the league. I mean, he is fantastic. His point production, considering that he's playing about, I would say, 14, 15 minutes a game. So it's like third line minutes. But his points per 60 is excellent because most of his points have come at 5-on-5. And he's got what? I think at the time of publishing, he had 19 points in, I want to say, like 32 games. So over half a point a game. But the key stat for me, there were two things. Number one, that the bulk of his points, about 80%, were primary points. That means he either scored the goal or he had the primary or the initial assist. And then on top of that is his goals were making a difference in the scoreboard. So his team was either trailing or he was putting his team ahead. If the game was tied, his team needed, let's say, an insurance goal. It's not like he was scoring garbage time points like a lot of some of these top kids used to doing. So the fact that he's doing all this as an undersized player in a men's league, and I went back and I dug into the numbers, his points per game right now, I think it's at like 0.58 or something. It would be the highest of a first-year eligible from Sweden in the SHL since 12-13. And that was Elias Lindholm, who was at like 0.62 or something. But he was a top 10 pick. So some people are starting to put Eklund as number 1 overall in the draft. I totally get it. I still got him ranked at number 10 because I don't like to give such massive bumps based off of, let's say, a 3 to 5 game sample when I watch a kid. But he's just fun to watch. He's his skating, his agility. He's not like a speed demon, Pavel Bure type or Connor McDavid, but he's quick and very slippery. But again, the fact that he could score in a whole bunch of ways, they've used him on the point on the power play because he's got a pretty good slapper. So there's just a lot to like about him. It was like one last thing about Eklund that I liked is that he'll mix it up after the whistle. It's not like he shies away from physical contact. If there's, and actually he got into a pretty big shoving match with his under 18 Swedish teammate, Anton Olsen, when they played Malmo one game. I like that. I like when these kids have that type of competitiveness in them and won't back down from a challenge. So from a shot volume, goal scoring, he's a dual threat because he could be a setup man or be a goal scorer. So I think he'd be a very wise choice to grab first overall in a fantasy type draft situation.
So something that you mentioned in there that really caught my ear was that the majority of his points are of the primary variety, and that he scores a lot of points that matter, that make a difference, right? Like the 2-1 goal, not the 7-1 goal.
Yeah.
And I think that might be one of the biggest differences between him and the second-ranked guy on the fantasy ranking list, Kent Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen a bunch of Michigan games, and I've seen the highlight reels. I've seen him score. I look at the box scores, and he's a very talented player. He's got a lot of skill. Footwork is a concern, but he scores a lot of points when the game's already out of reach.
Yeah.
So is that because, I don't know why. Why is that? Why would that be the difference? Is that like a competitive thing? Like the other team is kind of mailing it in already, so their compete level diminishes, which means he doesn't have to fight as hard to find that open space. The opposition's already defeated. Does it mean that the coach is saying, okay, this game's over. Let's go ahead and give, someone else some ice time. Kent, you're up. I don't think that's the case because he plays on a line with Beniers all season, so he's getting good minutes all the time. I don't know. I don't expect you would have an answer for that, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I do. I got a couple of answers for that. And actually, so, Kent Johnson's a guy that dominated the BCHL last season. He was the league MVP. He had, I think, 100 points, and he outscored the next guy by like 25. So it's a pretty big deal if you do that, and it's your draft -1 year. So we all knew who Kent Johnson was. He played at the World Junior A Challenge for Canada West, and I watched that tournament very, with a comb through it, very detailed, and I was blown away by this kid. I'm like, all right, he's going to be a top 10 candidate for the next draft. Some people even said number 1 overall. Now the thing about Michigan is this year's Michigan team is probably has the most impressive freshman class in college hockey history. And I could go back to college hockey in the 1980s. There've been a lot of good freshman classes, but Boston University when they had Chris Drury and Mike Greer, and I have a whole bunch of other guys I'm forgetting. But I know for a fact that when you have 3 guys on your freshman class who are going to be top 10 in the draft, and that's the case this year with Michigan with Beniers, Kent Johnson, the defenseman Owen Power,
No
and
question.
then by the way, you have former first-round picks in Thomas Bordeleau and Brendan Brisson and Cam York.
Right.
And so this is a loaded team. So there's only so much puck to go around, so much ice time to share. And so I think that when the season started, the coach had no choice but to put Beniers and Johnson on one of the lower lines. The thing is, though, and they were a 4th line. If you went by the way that the lines were used or deployed based on the flow of the game, that Johnson Beniers unit was the 4th option. You know, and obviously that wasn't the case when the team broke up a little bit when they had to send guys to the World Juniors. But so in that limited window that Johnson Beniers were given, they excelled. And the first 3 games of the season, I think they played like Arizona State twice, and then they played Wisconsin. So those were like that first grouping of games that Michigan had. That line with specifically Beniers and Johnson, they were driving possession. They were dominating the puck. The puck was not in their end a whole lot. It was mostly in the opposing end. There was one shift I saw with Beniers and Johnson, and I forgot the winger, the other guy, might have been Becker, where they had like a 2.5 minute shift. And even though Michigan was swapping out guys because other guys were tired, Beniers and Johnson stayed on the ice. It wasn't 2.5 minutes. Maybe it was like about 1:45. And they were running their cycles like crazy, wearing out the opposition. So it was from that where I realized, okay, so clearly these guys are gifted offensively. They're gifted on the puck. They understand how to wear down opponents. And it just so happens that because of Michigan's strength, the strength of their lineup, they are blowing out a lot of people. Not all the time. I think they're only like about above 500 team barely. But, like I said, there's only so much puck to go around. But at the same time, most of Johnson's points that he gets are during garbage time. And so you have to keep an eye on that. He's also a winger. Now, they list him as a center, but he's been playing wing with Michigan. And he doesn't shoot the puck all that often, and not as much as you'd like to see. Now, he's got an elite shot. It's one of his better strengths. But he was averaging under 2 shots a game, about 1.75 shots a game. And I'm thinking like, all right, that means that for all the cycling and the weaving that they're doing in the offensive zone, is it translating to chances or high danger scoring chances and quality looks at the net? And if you only have, you're not averaging at least 2 shots a game as a premier winger, then chances are means that you're probably passing up a lot of shots. And so that's one of my concerns moving forward with Johnson. But all that said, though, he's averaging, I think, well over a point a game as a freshman. I think he is the top scoring freshman in the nation. So, you don't want to nitpick the kid too much. But it's just something. It's the difference between he and Eklund, where Eklund is playing against men and scoring clutch points. Johnson's playing against college-age guys, and he's kind of getting the secondaries in garbage time. So we'll see how that translates.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between Michigan forwards here, Kent Johnson and Matty Beniers, who are ranked 2nd and 3rd overall on the fantasy rankings. So Kent Johnson's number 2. Matt Beniers came in at number 3. The difference between them in points on the scoring system on our rankings was a margin of 1. So a very, very fine hair. And they both have about the same points per game playing for Michigan. Now, one thing that I noticed was that Matty Beniers made the World Juniors and Kent Johnson did not. Both teams are stacked, Canada and USA. They're both loaded rosters. So I think the difference between the reason why one made it and the other didn't, because I think Matt Beniers brings more to the table than just offense. His motor is as outstanding. He's Charlie Hustle up and down the ice every day. He's versatile positionally, center, wing. He can play either position. If there's an injury, he can move up and fill in a top 6 role. His skill level allows that. But his overall game, his compete and physical play allow him to be an effective bottom 6 player. Is that the way you see the difference between these 2 players as well, Steve?
Yeah, when they played on the same line together, they had really great chemistry, like I said. And it's no slight on Johnson that he didn't make Team Canada because I mean, like I said, it was a loaded team, and they were basically 1 or 2 goals away from being the greatest World Junior team in the tournament's history. And so when Beniers made Team USA, I think the intent was to have him almost like the situation in Michigan, where he's a new guy and he's one of the youngest guys on the roster. If not, I think he was the youngest forward on the USA roster. And so we'll have him there on a bottom 6 role, 4th line center, penalty killer. He wasn't as dominant. He wasn't like a dominant face-off guy. So it's not like you could say, well, he could be our checking type who's going to take all the big draws. So when the rosters were finalized and Johnson didn't make it, you kind of understood it. When Beniers was listed as the last forward, you kind of understood it. But what happened was, Team USA, in that first game, I believe they lost to Russia. And so now that you've lost your, or did they beat Russia? I forgot what happened. Anyway, in the first game, it became obvious that Team USA was going to have some issues. And so I think they ended up losing to Russia. Now, yeah, they lost by 1 goal. And so Beniers was then given a chance to play more. And so somehow, well, not really somehow, because of his hustle, like you said, and his hard work and his versatility, his tenaciousness off the puck, his forechecking, finishing his checks, he was able to elevate himself to the second line. So now he goes from being the 4th line guy, really the last forward on the roster, to the second line, and on either wing, he has Matt Boldy on one wing, 12th overall pick by Minnesota, and Cole Caulfield, the 15th overall pick by Montreal in 2019. And Cole Caulfield is one of the best goal-scoring prospects we've ever seen. So you would think that, all right, it's a pretty good situation for him to be in, and that all Beniers really has to do is just, collect the puck every now and again and just give it to one of these talented wingers, and they'll do the rest, and maybe Beniers will get points by default. But actually the opposite rang true, where Beniers was doing all the work, a little bit of Matt Boldy as well. And it got to the point where people were criticizing Cole Caulfield that he wasn't doing enough, because every time you watched that line on the ice, it was the Beniers-Boldy combination that was just driving that puck right down the throat of the opposing defenses. And on top of that, they were also creating offense. I think Beniers had a couple of nice plays that led to scoring chances and got some points on the board as well. So the points are there. It's we really cannot label Matt Beniers as a checking type just because he checks those blocks. It's like Jonathan Taves or Mark Scheifele. Like, those guys are able to be on the ice late and close. They're able to shut down or be matched up against an opposing top line and still produce while doing their part once they're off the puck in their own end. So I'm glad that, his play at Michigan has been so impressive. The production's there to match it. And the one thing we're seeing lately too at Beniers is he's starting to shoot the puck more. He's an unselfish player. He's got very good vision because he, as a center for all the programs, the NTDP, playing for Michigan, and even for Team USA, we saw him spot that open man that nobody else expected. No one else expected, especially on that weak side. And so when you have the puck and you're close to the goal, the whole world is expecting you to shoot it. But Beniers has shown the ability to do either or. He'll either find that backdoor option, he'll pass it cleanly through traffic, thread the needle, or he'll use his plus. He's got a plus shot too. I mean, we've seen him using it more lately. So I think the potential is sky high. I think he's my number 2 ranked player overall in my rankings. I don't agree that he's a checking type, but as far as what he offers versus what Johnson offers, Johnson's not deficient in the defensive zone. He's got a pretty good work ethic as well, and he's an effective forechecker. But I think Beniers just, it's kind of like, I want to win 4 playoff rounds. So who do I take? Do I take Kent Johnson or do I take Matt Beniers? I think if that's what you want, you're gonna want to grab a guy like Beniers instead. So, both producing really well, but I think the slight edge has to go to Beniers because of that versatility, that his ability to impact shifts way beyond, puck control and scoring.
Yeah, I watch as many Michigan games as I can, obviously, because the big 3 are there this year, and they have, like you mentioned, a lot of other prospects that are fantasy relevant. But it's pretty safe to say that while he's been a highly ranked prospect going into this year's draft class, the World Juniors put him in the conversation for first overall. You mentioned earlier that not having the Ivan Hlinka was made this draft complicated, ranking this draft complicated, because that tournament really is what opens up the season on the draft class and is your first opportunity to get some sort of a hierarchy or rankings. Maybe a little early for a ranking, but it certainly gives you a hierarchy, right? So you already have an idea of what players are relevant for the draft. Then the Hlinka comes along and it puts a lot more focus or perspective onto your hierarchy. And then a tournament like the World Juniors can help with that a little bit. It certainly, if I have a player who I'm watching that's a draft eligible player at the World Juniors, if they have a tournament that's so-so or not very impressive, that doesn't knock them down on my opinion on them. It wouldn't move them down on my rankings. But if they have a great tournament and really stand out, it can absolutely vault them way up. And I think that's what we saw with Matt Beniers. He had a great tournament. He was an impactful player, and his game is endearing, right? Like, it's fun to cheer for this guy because, he competes so hard, and you can just see how much he loves playing the game too, right? So I think the World Junior certainly had a lot to do with putting I wouldn't say moving him up in the rankings necessarily, but I think it maybe properly ranked him, put him into a perspective of where he ought to be. So let's talk about the next guy on the list. So the top three were all forwards. And now it's time to start dipping into the defense class. And the highest ranked defenseman is Brent Clark. I don't think anybody had him ranked number one going into this, but he seems to be the one that's ahead of some of the other defensemen in this class. I'm talking about guys like Owen Power, Luke Hughes. So some pretty good competition between those three for sure. What do you like about Brent Clark?
He's just a smooth cat. He's a really smooth, poised, unnerved cat. When he decided to play, he played for Barrie last year. Barrie was going nowhere, and then they made a couple of trades. They got Ty Forster some help, and then they traded away the defenseman. Why am I forgetting his name? Is it Cade Landry, I think? Barrie ended up trading their number one overager defenseman, right? I think it might have been Cade Landry. But anyway, so that trade kind of coincided with Barrie's shift from being a mediocre team to a team that really was going to challenge or be a challenging team if they had the OHL playoffs, because they had that big top line. And so when I watch Barrie, I'm watching them for, of course, Ty Forster and Ethan Cardwell and Evan Vierling, the forward line. I'm looking at the defenses as well. So now you have a situation where Clark, because of that trade, had to become the number one defenseman for Barrie. And so Barrie's playing meaningful games. Clark is logging meaningful minutes. He's being used in the power play, penalty kill. And that's when I started to see why people are considering him potential number one overall pick for the 2021 draft. So we already knew him or knew of him. His brother Graham was a Devils draft pick, used to play for the 67s. And he was a high OHL priority pick as well. And so it's not like he came out of nowhere. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to see him in the playoffs. Didn't get a chance to see him at all. Really, we would have seen him at the Ivan Hlinka. He probably would have been Canada's number one defenseman there. And so because he's an 03 birthday, Owen Power's, I believe, a late birthday. So that's why it would have been Clark's team. But in any event, he decides to take his talents to Slovakia to play in the men's league there. It's called the Tipos Extraliga. For a team called Nova Zamki. I'm guessing I'm pronouncing it kind of okay.
Good enough for me.
On that team, so here's this 17-year-old kid who's playing in a men's league, and the Slovakian leagues, the Slovak league and the Czech league, are more physical than the Finnish league or the Russian league, or you know what I mean. So it's a physical circuit. And so I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So because the OHL is a little bit of kind of a run and gun league now. And I was really impressed with how quickly he adapted. The confidence that this kid has handling the puck is through the roof. He's never met a breakout opportunity that he didn't like. He'll take the puck, go end to end. He'll spin off of checks. I mean, and so he's got everything you'd really want. I mean, he's got size. He's 6'1", 185. Right shot. So we all know teams like that. So I'm not going to go as far as to say he's going to be like this player, but I'm just saying what he kind of reminds me of maybe a Scott Niedermayer type without the elite skating. Like, I think his skating is good, and he definitely has escapability, and I don't have any issues with his mechanics. But Niedermayer, of course, is like once in a lifetime type of a skating defenseman, where, Niedermayer was compared to Paul Coffey, and Coffey's one of the greatest skating defensemen of all time. So I'm not going to say that Clark is at that level, but in terms of puck management and on-ice leadership and decision-making, confidence in the passes, always making himself available to his partner. That's a big thing I look for. Sometimes you see defensemen always skating near their partner. Like, what the heck? Give me some room. We got to spread out when you bunch up, you just make it easier for the forecheckers. And so just an incredibly smart kid. In the beginning, his production wasn't really there. I think I wrote it in the write-up that he didn't have a point in 14 of his first 17 games there, but now he's starting to pick up the production, and that's just natural. This kid's in freaking Slovakia. He's not Slovakian. I don't think he has family there. Like, it's a complete change of environment going from Barrie, Ontario to wherever he is in Slovakia. So, and his brother was there, I guess, to kind of, make the transition a little bit easier. But you're looking at a guy with an elite shot. So his wrist mainly the wrist shot from the high point is good enough to not only, create a rebound issue for the goalie, but score as well. I mean, he's got a plus shot. So you're looking at a power play quarterback type, number one franchise caliber defenseman, 40, 50, 60 points a season, a little bit of Brent Burns. I said a little bit of Scott Niedermayer. I mean, there's a lot to like about this kid. And he's got that edge to his game. I mean, he's taking some pretty nasty penalties too. He's elbowing people. He's slashing them. So he's got a little bit of bite in his game as well. So I like him a lot. If you want to put him in the running for first overall, I could see why. This is a situation where I'm really happy that his move to Slovakia has worked out for him. Because he could have gone there and not done a whole lot. And even in the game, remember I said he only points in 14 to 17 games, but he was still like a number 2 or 3 defenseman there. He was on the power play. He was on the ice when they're down to go late, on the ice when there's a critical defensive zone draw when they're trying to hold the lead. So he was still impacting the game or impacting his shifts without producing points. But we all know the kid can produce points. So if he was in the OHL this year and it was a full season, you're probably looking at an 80 to 85 point season. That he's that good with the puck. So, but really, I'm happy things are working out for him because it's a bold move. Not a lot of kids were able to do it. He did, and it's worked out great.
Yeah, I like this kid too. I watched him a few times with when he was with the Don Mills Flyers, mainly because I was watching Shane Wright, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that the Frontenacs were in a position to draft Shane Wright, so I was pretty excited about that, being a Kingston native, and that I was going to get to see a lot of Shane Wright live. Missing that this year. And so as I'm watching the Don Mills games, you can't help but notice this Brent Clark kid. He's their number one defenseman. He was on the ice it seemingly perpetually. Like, it almost seemed like he never came off the ice. And that season he had 113 points in 73 games. Now, Don Mills was a loaded team. One of the best teams in probably recent GTHL history. But he stood out. He didn't have any glaring weaknesses in his game. He had, his size was a definite advantage at 16 years old over the competition. His skating, like you said, I was like, man, this kid's going to jump right into the OHL. His skating is already at a level where, his backward skating is almost as fast as most other players' forward skating. Yeah. His balance was outstanding. His edge work was great. His shot was his vision for the game, offensively and defensively. There didn't seem to be any holes in his game. And then playing in the OHL last season as a rookie, 38 points in 57 games, not too shabby. Like you said, he's a physical player as well. So, well, for fantasy purposes, I tend to put a lot more emphasis on forwards than defensemen. There's not a lot to not like about Brent Clark, other than the fact that he's not a forward, looking at a fantasy point of view. I guess that's why he ranks number 4th.
Yeah.
5th ranked guy on this list is Jasper Walstad, the Swedish goaltender. Going into the World Juniors, the guest I had talking about Team Sweden, we were discussing their goaltending and how Hugo Alnefelt played for them the season before, was very strong in goal for Sweden, and then he would be the incumbent going in. And he agreed with that based on, politics in their resumes, but didn't mix any bones about it. He said, despite that, I think Jasper Walstad is the much better goalie between the two. And if I were the coach, that's the guy that I would play, but I don't think that's the guy that they're going to play. And then we watched the tournament, and while he was pretty much right. Alnefelt played more games, but I thought they should have played Walstad more than Alnefelt. Not that Hugo played poorly, but I just think Wallstad's the better goalie. The last few drafts have had some outstanding goaltenders in Spencer Knight and Yaroslav Askarov, and it looks like he's in the same kind of category as those two goalies. Usually goalies don't go in the first round of the draft these days anymore, but I think it's safe to say that Wallstad's not only a lock for the first round, but he's a contender for top 10, top 5.
Sure.
And we had someone rank him number 1.
Yeah.
So how does he rack up against Spencer Knight and Yaroslav Askarov, who he went head to head with in the World Juniors, and I thought he held his own quite well. So people will have those assets in their fantasy league. If you're looking for a franchise goalie, and you got those 3 guys to choose from, where do you at this point, where would you rank Walstad in that class?
Well, I still think that Spencer Knight, I mean, that's actually a really tough question, because goalies at this age, I mean, it's so difficult to assess them, and whether it be from a mechanical standpoint or upside, whatever you want to say, all 3 of those goalies have definitely done their part to validate them going first in the first round. Remember, people were trending downwards or towards the idea of getting a goalie in the first round. And now we're going to look at the third straight year what's going to happen with Walstad. Knight, you can barely score against the guy. He's just absolutely dominating college hockey. And I'm not even going to get to the stats, because, leagues vary. Goal scoring varies from league to league. So, like, for example, it's a lot easier to score in the Swedish J20 Super Elite than it is to score in college hockey and so on. So, but what I like about Walstad, as opposed to Knight or Askarov, is that while Askarov played against mostly men in his half season, and really Askarov's season in 1920 was a half season. He barely played after, I want to say, like January 10th or something. He played like 2 games. But that Askarov played in the VHL. It's a men's league. It's adult age. And he was kind of like, he wasn't the number 1, but he was kind of like splitting duties. Spencer Knight in his draft year played for the NTDP, which is you're basically playing only junior age kids. What I like about Walstad is he is playing not only in the elite SHL against adults, but like the best, Swedish league out there. And we all know that the SHL is probably neck and neck with the KHL as the best non-NHL league in the world. The thing is, though, is that Walstad is playing for a freaking powerhouse, Luleå, and they are the number 1 or number 2 team in the league this year. I think they've had a couple of losses the last few games. It's between them and Rogla. But Luleå is like a legit program, okay? They are the team that, they've been making a mincemeat out of everybody this past season. Very tough to score against. They got a bunch of NHL prospects on there. Noel Gundler played for them last year. This year, in the years prior, they had Nils Lundqvist, a really good Ranger defenseman, prospect. And so Walstad, within that context, he's not a number 1 because he splits duties, but he was posting some really impressive numbers. 1-loss wise, you name it, goals against, save percentage. The thing is, though, he doesn't see a lot of rubber, and that's not really his fault. That's because he plays for a really good team, and his last few games haven't been all that great. I think Malmo beat him up pretty bad. Actually, got him yanked. But that happens with these goalies. Carey Price gets yanked. Henrik Lundqvist got yanked. But speaking of Lundqvist, if you talk to the Swedish goalie people and the Swedish hockey types, they'll tell you that in their mind that Walstad is the best goaltending prospect they've had really almost ever, going all the way back, let's say 30 years. You want to go back to Pelle Lindberg, you go back to Pelle Lindberg or Tommy Salo. I'd throw Henrik Lundqvist in there, but he wasn't all that heralded. Lundqvist was a late round pick.
Yeah.
But stylistically, Walstad has said, I model my game after Henrik Lundqvist. He stays deep in the net. He absolutely dominates the lower half. So from a maturity standpoint, is the NHL ready? Probably not. Has to probably maybe get a year or two in the AHL to get used to the North American game and all that. Traffic in front of the net is a big thing. You get a lot more traffic in front of the net in the North American game than you do in the European game. And this is just an observation I've made over the years. So how is he going to adapt? Well, he's a big guy. What is he, like 6'3", 200 pounds, but he's quick. He could fight through screens. But the fact that he's putting up pretty impressive numbers in a men's league as a number 1A on one of the best teams in the league, that means a lot to me. So I've even tweeted it out. I said, hey, you want to take Jasper Walstad first overall? Be my guest. I will not complain about it. The issue is going to be convincing everybody else, if that's what your thing is, that, hey, we're taking a goalie over these really flashy point producers. But I see no reason why we can't say he's going to be a franchise number one. This guy's been playing above his age group for years. When he was 16, he was playing at the U18 level. When he was 17, he was playing at the U20 level. And now that he's 17, 18, he's playing against men. So definitely a guy that you want to earmark as a legitimate candidate to be a number one franchise goalie in the NHL.
Interesting. I think we spoke pretty favorably about Brent Clark, and I think he's got number one defenseman, maybe not, franchise player upside, but number one defenseman upside. And we talk about Jasper Walstad, and he's got number one goalie franchise upside, Olympic gold medal kind of future potential. And they're not even the top one or two ranked guys in this draft. And right off the hopper on this podcast, we talked about how this doesn't have any franchise players. So I guess we're not calling these guys that, like we do with some players in their draft year, is saying this guy is going to be that. Draft him as soon as you can. I think with this draft, we're looking at a couple of guys who have the potential to develop into that.
Yes.
And then there's some other guys who maybe don't have that kind of upside, but look like they're a little bit more of a sure thing. A lower floor, but not as high as ceiling, maybe. We're talking Eklund and Beniers here.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, to sum up what you just said, Jasper Walstad, very good. If you have to choose between one of the three, there is no wrong choice.
Yeah. they're on the same boat. They're on the same boat.
Yeah. All right. So I don't want to spend, 10 hours going through every player and having long conversations about all 32 players that were ranked on this list. But, we're still in the top 5 here. So let's hit a few more names. Owen Power is the next ranked guy, going back on the blue line here and back to Michigan with their third player. He might be the one between the three of them that is drafted first out of the three, or he could even possibly be drafted first overall. A lot of draft rankings have Owen Power at number 1. So on the fantasy rankings, he drops down to 6, which I find very fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about that. His NHL value seems to be outweighing his fantasy value.
Yeah, he's just an outstanding in-game manager. Now, from a point production standpoint, he's the leading scorer amongst freshman defensemen. And the reason why that's a big deal is he's a first-year draft eligible, so you rarely get those in college hockey. And that, freshmen in college hockey, they're not always fresh out of high school. Like, the normal is you graduate high school and then you go on to college as a freshman. Well, with the case of college hockey, is a lot of these kids, they'll stay in the USHL for a couple of years, right? They'll maintain their eligibility and they get to, develop their game. So a lot of times these kids will be freshmen, but they'll be about 20 years old or maybe sometimes even 21 years old. Whereas in Clark's case, he was basically, I think he was 17 or 18 going in, and he just turned 18. So he's a pure freshman, and he's the leading scorer, amongst his peers, right? His peers being, first-year defenseman in college hockey. And unlike Johnson, a lot of his points are meaningful, and they're of the primary variety of 5-on-5. Now, a big reason for this is because they have Cam York, and Cam York, first-round pick of the Flyers in 2019. He was on the USA World Junior Team. I believe he was the captain. And so when you have a guy like that already in his, I believe, second year at Michigan, you're not going to just say, well, here's this Owen Power guy. He's got higher upside than you, so we're going to make him the number 1. So on the Michigan power play, in the beginning, it was much like the NTDP, the way that they ran it was Cam York running the point and then 4 forwards. But little by little, it's like, all right, this Owen Power guy, we need to kind of incorporate him into this attack. And so he'd be out there as well with the 4 forward unit, or he'd be on the points with Cam York as well. So you would have the 2D and 3 forward look. And what that tells me is that the coaching staff acknowledges that this guy has the potential to put up a lot of points and facilitate and run a power play. He did that with Chicago in the USHL last year, and he's obviously doing it this year again with Michigan. Hobie Baker candidate, no doubt. I don't know if he's going to win it because he's so young. But you're looking at a guy who's, to me, he's a throwback. And I'm going to date myself here. I don't care. But he's like a combination of Larry Robinson, Kevin Hatcher, and Larry Murphy. And, 2 of those guys being Hall of Famers, and Kevin Hatcher was on track for a Hall of Fame career, but injuries kind of derailed it. But a big, mobile, in-game manager. He's not like overly physical and nasty in a Robinson kind of a way, but he is physical. You see him give a lot of hard shoves and cross checks to the back of guys in front of the net. So this is another case where we talked about earlier where, like Johnson, you're not seeing him shoot the puck as much as you'd like him to. That probably has to do more with the fact that he's being unselfish and the roster that he has to play with. But his shot production has increased. So instead of getting 1 to 2 every shots a game, he's now getting 3 and 4 shots every game. And he's got a great shot. He's got a very hard slapper. They have set plays for him. He'll activate a ton. He's almost like a 4th forward out there sometimes. The difference between, I would say, Power and Clark, for this particular ranking, I have Power ranked ahead of Clark, and I have Power as the number 1 defenseman, is the fact that he's a real elite playmaker. I'm not saying that Clark isn't a good playmaker, but Power is almost like a forward out there sometimes. I mean, some of the passes he makes forehand or backhand, incredibly creative, very sharp mind. So I think that it's almost like the catcher in baseball where the pitchers all want to pitch to him. They like the game he calls. I think a lot of forwards like being on the ice with Owen Power out there because he draws so much attention away from them, and that's where the time and space comes into play. So he's my number 1 ranked guy for the draft. He's my number 1 overall rank, non-fantasy wise. I think the sky's the limit for him.
All right, that's pretty good. Do you see any lapses in judgment or decision making in his game? Because I've caught some wind of that from some of the prospect writers recently.
I don't want to disparage anybody's opinion, but they would have to come up with a very detailed report on that, because I've been watching this kid now for the first time I saw him, he was 16 in Youngstown way back in 2018. I got a chance to see him play when he was with Chicago, and it's his IQ. I've tweeted out examples of his hockey IQ and how high it is. The able to process multiple options in a second's time. It's very rare. It's a gift. It's innate. It's something that these top prospects don't really learn. They're just born with it. And I've never once seen him make the types of mistakes that are so egregious. We're like, oh, what was he thinking? Well, what a selfish play. Or why is he like putting his teammate in a bad spot? To me, his hockey IQ is through the roof. And I've actually tweeted out, I said it, and I'll stand by it, that since I've been covering the draft, since 2015, he is the smartest defense prospect I've seen, hands down. It's not even close. And that includes Rasmus Dahlin. That includes Ivan Provorov. This kid is a fantastic in-game manager. So if people want to criticize decision-making, you're going to have to quantify that in some way. You're going to have to say, okay, well, I watched this game. He made 45 passes, and of those 45 passes, 22 were picked off or intercepted or forced, and something like that. Because if you're just going to make if you're going to put a game on one day and he makes a bad decision that leads to a scoring chance, you can't just walk away from that and say, oh, well, he's a bad decision maker. You got to really build some type of storyline and say, okay, he made mistakes in this one game. Is he going to do it the next game? Is he going to do it the game after that? Is this a trend, or is it just, was he sick? Did he have COVID? Like, there's so many things that to factor in. If you're going to go label a kid to have a low hockey IQ or to be a bad decision maker, when all the reports are against that, you're going to have to kind of quantify that in some way. And I haven't seen that yet. I've just seen people make kind of blanket statements like, I don't like his decision making. All right, well, how? But again, to each his own. They want to say that, fine. But I vehemently disagree with the idea that Owen Power has a low hockey IQ. It's almost like saying like Lawrence Taylor isn't a good defensive player or that Dominic Hasek couldn't make big saves. It just boggles my mind. But like I said, it's an opinion-based industry, and everyone's entitled to theirs.
Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one.
Yep.
All right, moving on the rankings. We got a couple of wingers here back to back who scored very similarly. Dylan Gunther and Fabian Lyselle. So when most people contributed the rankings to these, which was a few weeks ago now, Dylan Gunther was one of those players who hadn't played a game yet this season. So they were basically just going off his rookie season in the Dub, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
And since then, he's been able to get back on the ice in the Dub, and he's been on fire. I think he had a hat trick in his first game or something like that, and I think he's got 2 points a game that he's scoring at right now. So, I think it's probably, I haven't looked at a lot of draft rankings in the last week or so, but he's probably moving up pretty quickly. And then Fabian Lyselle, playing over in the SHL, has been playing all season long, and his point production over there isn't really eye-popping. He's got 3 points in 24 games. So obviously there's a massive difference between the Dub and the SHL. One's a pro league with men, and one's got a bunch of teenagers in it. So let's talk about these two players, and if you have any concern about Lyselle's offensive upside based on his stats. I mean, we see lots of guys who are highly ranked prospects playing in the SHL that aren't producing a lot of points there, and then still are more than fantasy relevant when they make it to the NHL. So let's talk about these two guys a little bit and what their offensive upside could be like.
Yeah, I love them both. I'm a little bit higher on Gunther than I am on Lyselle, but the thing is, well, first off with Gunther, and like you said, I mean, the fact that he was always in my top 10, and I always consider him a candidate to go first overall. I know Hockey Canada has been pushing that, like, hey, don't forget about us. Like, we have some pretty good quality players too, just because of the European leagues going on. There was a lot of attention was paid towards the Swedish types and the Finnish types and the Russian types and the American types. But now that the Dub is back on, Dylan Gunther, what I loved about him, there were two examples that I used to consider him a top 10 pick or even a top 5 pick. And that was, number one, the way he played for Team Canada. I believe it was Team Canada White at the U17 World Hockey Challenge, where this kid, he's wiry, right? He's like 6 foot, but like 160, 165, all right, maybe 170. But he's a wiry kid. And you would think, like, okay, so he's this wiry playmaking finesse type based on his measurements, but he's not a center, he's a wing. But he was out there throwing the body. He's killing penalties. He's hitting after the whistle, even illegally. Sometimes I like that. All right. So it means that it goes back to what I said about Eklund, where, it shows that you're involved in the game. There's a human element to this game, not just with stats and scoring, whatever. Like, if two teams don't like each other and it gets chippy in the beginning, then that impacts the way that the game is played. Things tighten up. It's more difficult to score, especially if one team is pushing back as hard as the other team is pushing. And so with Gunther in those games, he does not change his style. He's a very engaged young man who offers you a lot more than just playmaking. The playmaking is freaking fantastic. It's through the roof. So he, much like Brent Clark, is a highly regarded kid. I think he was the first overall Bantam pick for Edmonton. And the other thing that I noticed with him last year was that he played on Edmonton's top line, and Edmonton was kind of like I don't want to say a rebuilding team, but from a previous seasons prior, they were like an up-and-coming team, not necessarily a powerhouse, but he, by himself almost, made that top line a threat every night. And he played on a line with Jake Neighbors. He was a first-round pick of the Blues, kind of like a rugged, physical type. So they had a really good marriage, on-ice marriage, where, you have the skill and the grit with the, the power and the grit, and it worked out. So what does he have, like 10 points in his first 4 games this season? He tried to play in the AJHL for Sherwood Park, which is a big-time program in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and he was okay, but he only played like 2 or 3 games. So it seems like he might have been watching the rankings, like, wait, some people are ranking me in the 15s and 20s? Why? Because I'm not playing? I'll show them. And then he shows up and he has these great showings early on in this WHL season. So there's a lot to like about him. I think he's another one that you could earmark as a potential first overall pick. There's really not, there's just a whole bunch to like about his game. Lyselle is an interesting story because he was playing for Frölunda. And Frölunda is the Montreal Canadiens, I guess. Maybe I could be overstating this, but they're like the big name franchise in Sweden. And when it comes to recruits and getting the top talent, they seem to have the edge over most of the programs in Sweden. So this year's 03 group, late 02, 03 group was a very good one for Frölunda. And when you watch them play in the J20 league, they were scoring like freaking 11 goals a game. I mean, they have all these high NHL draft picks on it. Even Lucas Raymond played for them a couple of games last year. And so within that context, you have a guy like Lyselle. He was on the top line playing for Frölunda. But it was very obvious early on into his J20 season that he was just too good for the league. So you look at the points, you're like, all right, yeah, what do you have, like 13 points in 11 games? Well, the big reason behind that was the fact that there was so many forwards on that squad. There's just not enough ice time for him. But in like his top 6 role, 58 shots in 11 games. I mean, that's almost 6 shots a game. That's crazy. Well, at least well over 5 shots a game. So I don't know the specifics of the deal, but for whatever reason, he wanted out. He didn't want to be with Frölunda anymore. He wanted to get traded to another team. And eventually he did. And he got traded to Luleå, which is that top program again. And I was watching him closely because, Lyselle being a high volume shooting, sniping, right wing, right shot on a team like Luleå, a competitive team, same situation like it was last year for Noel Gundler. Now, Noel Gundler was a guy that last year people were saying, oh my God, he's not in your top 10. He's a top 10 talent. I'm like, I don't know. I don't see. When I watch him play, I see a one-dimensional type. So, and of course, Gundler ended up getting traded from Luleå to, I think, Brynäs because he wanted more ice time. So that's how I was going to observe Lyselle this year, was like, not only did he force a trade, which might be a little bit of a red flag sometimes when a young kid forces a trade. Not only did he force a trade, but now he's forced a trade to a rival. And on that rival, they're deep and they're good. And how's he going to fit into that situation? So as expected, he was on the 4th line. But, I mean, this kid's effort has been off the charts. And I watched a couple of games with him where he played about anywhere from like 11 to 12 minutes, which I think is enough. But against a competitive team, one game I watched him play against Rögle. And this kid the thing about him that stands out, besides the shot proclivity, is the speed. I mean, he's got excellent speed. He's probably one of the fastest skating wingers in the draft. But it's just the overall decision-making, knowing where to position himself, supporting his forwards and defensemen down low, engaging in puck battles. When you play for a really good team, you're not going to be asked to score. Chances are the coach is like, listen, just stay out of trouble. We're not going to use you on the penalty kill. You might see some power play time. What I want you to do is just work with your line mates, be aggressive, be dangerous, but at the same time, be responsible. And he's checking all those blocks. So he's the kind of kid where if he played in the CHL or he played in the USHL, he'd be putting up well over a point a game and posting all these gaudy stats. But he's a kid who's basically, for this scenario, playing with a top contending team in Luleå, he's staying within himself. But on occasion, you'll see the burst into open ice, the attacking the net with authority and power. And so, I think they're 2 different types of wingers. I do think that Lyselle can be a playmaker, a pass-first type if he wanted to. But you're looking at Gunther being the pass-first type who could score goals if asked. Lyselle being the shoot-first type who could set up plays if asked. So, I mean, a little different types of players, but got to give the edge to Gunther simply because he's always had that pedigree and looks like he's going to be, one of the top scorers in the WHL this season.
Yeah. I put out a tweet a few days ago just before the fantasy ranking came out with a poll on it saying, who would you take first overall in your fantasy draft? And I made options like, I think it was Owen Power, Eklund, and Beniers or something to that effect. And then the 4th option was other. And if you pick that, put in the comments below who it's going to be. And the comment thread was pretty heavy. Dylan Gunther, heavy. A lot of people think that he has a chance to go first overall in the NHL draft. and or at least be in consideration for it. No one had him ranked higher than 4th overall on their fantasy ranking for this. So I really like the sleeper potential here for a great value pick, if you can have a value pick in the top 10 of a draft, with Dylan Gunther. It looks like he's a guy that a lot of people are quietly really high on, and he might be sliding under the radar a little bit in this draft. So in a draft that's kind of weak, you look for things like that. You look for guys who could be the David Pastrnak, who's in 10 years or 5 years from now, we look back on the draft and you think, how could you have not picked that guy first or second? Like those, look at the teams that passed on him and who they got instead. So I wonder if that ends up being Dylan Gunther in a few years' time. Time will tell. The next defenseman on this list is Luke Hughes. We all know the Hughes family real well. So Luke Hughes ranks 9th, and he comes in behind Clark and Owen Power. And for an NHL draft ranking list, I really don't have a problem with that. But for a fantasy one, I haven't seen as much of Luke Hughes play as you have. My initial thought is, how does he compare to Quinn? Is he the same kind of player? Because if he's anything like Quinn Hughes, he should be the top-ranked defenseman, I would think. I mean, the guy was candidate for the Calder Trophy as a rookie. His offensive upside is through the roof, so he's very translatable to fantasy. And the Hughes brothers have gone on record saying, like, yeah, we're good, but wait for Luke. He's the best one out of the 3 of us. Is that just, brotherly love pumping up their bro, or and how does he compare to Quinn? What's your take on Luke Hughes?
Stylistically, he compares to Quinn. Absolutely. He's a bigger body, though. I think he's like 6'2". So basically, you have a 6'2" Quinn Hughes, and he's just fun to watch. He's a lot of fun to watch. Now, the one thing about the NTDP that Quinn Hughes played for, and then in his draft year, the Michigan team he played for, was not that deep. So they really leaned on Quinn to be the like that on ice general, right? So, usually like that's the 2016-17 NTDP was a 1-line team. Quinn was on that as a draft -1, and he was able to kind of like do his own thing. Most of the other defensemen on that squad were physical types, whereas and then he goes to Michigan, same thing. He's the finesse guy, the leader. This year's NTDP is very deep, has a lot of skilled forwards on it, and it also has a lot of skilled defensemen as well. So Luke Hughes, from a stylistic standpoint, the skating, the cleanliness of his stride, how smooth he is, his grace, the fluidity of his movements. I mean, it is all like Quinn. Okay, and it's no surprise. I mean, if they get the same instruction from their families and their coaches and whoever's been developing them throughout the years, it's no surprise that the Hughes brothers, all 3 of them, are known for their skating, their agility, their edge work. Just so many factors that involved in skating, not just speed. When it comes to speed, it's fantastic. He could go into end in a hurry. He does that usually once or twice a game. He's I don't want to say he's the primary power play quarterback, but he certainly acts and looks like one when you have a power play as stacked as the NTDP has got. So I get why people would want to compare him to Quinn Hughes. The one thing that he does from a point production standpoint that is impressive to me is that, the NTDP schedule is usually broken up into 3 parts, right? They have the international portion of the schedule where they play the U18 teams of the other nations. They have the USHL schedule, which is their major junior opponents. And then they have the college schedule, which is usually against the big name programs, right? The Michigans and the Wisconsins and the Boston Universities and the North Dakotas. Well, this year, because of COVID, there's no international tournament, right? There won't be one until, like I said, the U18 Worlds in April, early May. The college schedule has been I don't want to disrespect the colleges, but it's been a joke. Some of the colleges that the NTDP players have played this year, it's been very easy. I mean, we're talking about Division 1 and Division 1A and Division 2 level quality competition. It's almost like, the top Memorial Cup winning team in Canada playing like a U.S. Bantam team. I mean, that's how big of a disparity it can be. And so all we really have to go off of is how well he's played against the USHL quality or portion of his schedule, and he's been great. And so the other thing that I look at is that his risk taking is a little more. What's the word I'm looking for? there's a lot more danger inherent in the risk that he takes than when Quinn used to do when he was at that same age. Maybe handling the puck or overhandling it a little bit too much near his line. Still learning the position, how to defend the 2-on-1, little things like that, which are all fixable, of course. But as far as point production goes, he's a leading scoring defenseman on the NTDP. He's running their top power play unit, or he just knows how to facilitate it. He's got a hard shot, outstanding shot, actually. He's very accurate, much like his brother. And so I could see why. I mean, if you're going to say he's Quinn Hughes' brother and they say he's better, rank him in the top 5, maybe even first overall. But looking at it from a non-fantasy standpoint, I would say, there's some minor concerns that we got to work on. But from a fantasy standpoint, I mean, you're looking at a Zach Werenski type, a guy that's going to be able to impact the game with his wheels, with his playmaking, with his vision, with his shot. And so you pretty much get all the areas, the key stat areas get checked when it comes to Hughes, because he could shoot it, he could pass it, and he's going to log a lot of minutes in the game to get plenty of opportunities.
We opened this podcast talking about how this draft class is on the weak side and comparing it to some of the more in different drafts in the last decade. And maybe it's one of the more underrated drafts. I mean, a lot of the guys that we've delved into in depth here are players who I'd be quite happy to draft in my fantasy league and stash them on my prospect bench for a year or two and see where they go. I mean, we're talking about players who are comparing favorably with fantasy relevant players and have pretty good upside. And just wrapping up the top 10, now we come full circle and talk about Aatu Räty, who off the hop we kind of mentioned a little bit, and how he was the consensus number one long range looking at this draft, and he slipped all the way down to 10. But I mean, you don't get consideration for first overall 2 years before your draft class for no reason, right? Like, the fact that he hasn't progressed very much this year is certainly a major red flag. That's one of the most important things that scouts look for is, how are you progressing here? How are you developing? Because, you don't want to use your first overall draft pick on a player who's as good as he's ever going to get. Right? Like, you want players who will be their very best version of themselves 5 years from now, much better than they are now. It's projection. Basically what I'm saying is, I kind of like all the things you're saying here, Steve. These are some fantasy relevant players.
Yeah.
Certainly it's not as good as some of the players we've seen in recent drafts. There's no super high-end guy here who you can, there's no Alexis Lafreniere you can insert onto your roster right away. But, that hasn't worked out so well in the last few years either. Capo Caco, Alexis Lafreniere, Jack Hughes, those guys didn't go first overall, and then you insert them on your fantasy roster and you go from, last place to a contender right away.
Yeah.
There's a lot to like in this draft. So that's the top 10 of the fantasy rankings. There's a couple other players who I thought were really interesting, and the range in which all the contributors had them ranked. And one guy in particular you had in your top 10. Some people had him ranked lower. Some people didn't have him ranked. And that is, I don't know how to pronounce his name right, but Sasha
Pastujov.
Pastujov. Thanks. I was going to say Pastuov, but that was close. So tell me a little bit about this guy. I'm pretty sure he plays for the American USNDP team as well. So you've seen him play quite a bit. Yeah. What's your file on him?
Sniper. He's a hard shooting sniper. I mean, not just a sniper though, because he's a dual threat, because he could be a playmaker, just as good of a playmaker as he can be a sniper. But they've crafted, they mean the NTDP and their coaching staff, they've crafted a number of set plays for this guy to just wind it up and fire it. So he's a left shot playing on the right wing. But here's a guy that you're going to see not only be a high volume shooter and be a power play fixture, much like a Patrick Laine or Alexander Ovechkin, where we just see the whole entire power play is geared towards one guy unloading it, and the opposition knows that. And so it really becomes a cat and mouse game over, whether, the guy's going to get the shots off or you're going to try to neutralize him. And more times than not, he's going to get his shots off. I mean, he's going to, and if he misses the net, he misses the net. But as far as like having that presence, he's about 6'1", 180. He's a physical kid. His skating, I think, is very underrated because I've never really seen it as a major problem. And you're looking at a goal scorer, right? So it's not like you want a guy to be like this blazing thoroughbred. He's a goal scorer, and goal scorers need to know how to get open. They need to know how to release the puck quickly. They need to know how to not just hit the net, but hit the corners and make the goalie work for his saves. And Pastujov does all that. So his points per game right now is, I think it's like 1.70. And if it stands, it's going to be like the third or fourth highest in the program's history. And that's only less than, let's say, Jack Hughes or Clayton Keller. So you're looking at a guy in the Alex Turcotte, category when it comes to points per game. Now, the one thing that I liked about Pastujov and why I gave him such a huge bump in the rankings was that top line, the NTDP's top line a year ago, was left wing Dylan Duke, a center named Chaz Lucius, and then the right wing was Pastujov. And at the World U17 Hockey Challenge in November of 19, they just tore up the tournament. I think all three were the top three scorers. They had no one had an answer for Lucius, no one had an answer for Pastujov. So that off the bat was like, all right, this kid's obviously a big deal. He's going to be one of the top prospects coming out of the NTDP for the upcoming draft. Well, Lucius got hurt to start this season. So when the NTDP kicked off their campaign, it was going to be without Lucius. So they had to kind of do some shuffling, but the top line still had the likes of Pastujov on one wing and then Dylan Duke on the other. And his production without Lucius was freaking through the roof. I mean, he was averaging about 1.80 points a game. And now that Lucius is back, the thing is Lucius himself is a shooter. He's got a very good, he's got the knack for scoring goals. And so it's almost like when you watch them play, Dylan Duke leads the team in goal scoring. He's like almost, I think, got 30 goals in 20 games. So how do you have three goal scorers on one line? And how do you share the puck? How do you figure out who gets the set plays, who gets the shots? So even within this environment, a guy like Pastujov is still able to contribute, still able to get his shots off, still able to score. And so I just think, you're looking at a high volume shooting winger who could finish. But also, I think he's got like 25 goals and 25 assists. So he's the leading scorer on the team. And this type of versatility on the puck, at least, and be that lethal threat on the power play. It's not like he's always just shooting the puck on the power play. He knows how to move the puck around as well. And he's a pretty good two-way type. He knows how to position his stick and, aggressive on the forecheck. So, I'm definitely higher on him than most. I have him ranked, I think, 5th overall in my normal rankings. But from a fantasy standpoint, yeah, he's a goal scorer. I mean, he's a guy that shoots the puck with authority, and the other team knows it. And so I don't see that trend stopping anytime soon. I think as he progresses, he's committed to Notre Dame. He's actually not going to go to Michigan like his two brothers. So he's going to go to Notre Dame. They got a pretty big class coming in. Don't see him lasting there all that long. And once he gets to the AHL, same thing. You'll see him as like that top power play option with the hammer from the circle.
Interesting to see where he ends up getting selected in the NHL draft. I find most people in fantasy drafts use the NHL draft board as their draft board for their fantasy hockey drafts, which is fraught with peril. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where a list like this comes in. He ended up being ranked overall 20th on our list, and you had him. I think you're the only guy that had him inside your top 10. A couple other people had him close. Most other people who ranked him had him in the 20 range, and a couple guys didn't even have him on their board at all. I mean, and that's fine, right? Like,
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, like if you live in Canada and you're not watching a lot of the NTDP games, then you just don't know them, so you don't rank them. And why would you make it up? So that's why I get a consensus ranking. So I get a wide variety of expertise and flavor, and most of the guys who contribute to this list are people who watch all the levels. But of course, you watch some more than other because there's just too much hockey to catch it all. Another guy that had a wide range of rankings is Carson Lambos, and he ended up being ranked overall, can't find him, 14th. You had him way down on your list. Some other guys had him in their top 10. So here's another volatile ranker who's all over the map. What's What's your take on the Canadian defenseman?
Well, here's the thing. So just to kind of segue into what you said was that an NHL draft board is constructed based on a lot of factors, right? You're not drafting kids to an NHL team because you want to see how many points they put up or how many shots they take. You want to have a cornerstone building block that you can make makes the team better, whether it be a defensive defenseman or a goalie or whatever. So within that context, I ranked Lambos number 3. Very, very lofty praise for a kid like that. But from a fantasy standpoint, I ranked him a lot lower, and that's because I can see him developing into a really good smothering shutdown type who maybe like a Ryan McDonough, who won't put up a whole bunch of points, but, or like a Vlasic, where you just want him on the ice. They're going to play 20 to 25 minutes a game. Do I see similarities to Duncan Keith and Drew Doughty? Absolutely. There were some. And he went over to Finland to play because, the WHL season got shut down. So last year with Winnipeg, he was great. He was, I think, the top scoring rookie defenseman in the WHL, was on the power play, sharing the points with the kid Zalati. And then, so he goes over to Finland and he plays for a program called YIP. Yip was not very good before he got there. They had a lot of issues, not only winning, but they had a lot of issues keeping the puck out of the net. And since he arrived, it was a 180. That they became not only a winning team, that became a really good defensive team. And he was logging 20 to 22 minutes a game, played on the power play, top penalty kill, like basically a problem solver for them. Although they did have a couple of other quality defensemen at this time, so it's not like he was able to just walk in and be the number one. He had to compete against them, but the coaching staff there was definitely, obviously, comfortable using him. And he even got a chance to play a couple of games in the SM League. I think he played like 2 games in the men's league. So a really good experience for him. I think he'll be probably one of the top 1 or 2 defensemen in the WHL this season. I kind of compared him a little bit to Drew Doughty and Duncan Keith in terms of stylistically, the way he skates, the way he handles the puck, but he's also physical. He's a very strong guy. He delivers hard hits, so he's very tough to get around. I'm just wondering from a fantasy standpoint, is he going to be a perennial Norris Trophy candidate because of his point production or because of his defensive play? And I think that in the end, he's such an unselfish player that he's going to probably focus more on the defensive side than anything else. I mean, he's a vacuum cleaner in the neutral zone. And if he does get a lot of points, though, it'll probably be because of the team he plays for and the forward group that he has surrounding him. Although he is creative, it's not like he's a high maintenance type. It's just that he puts such a premium on protecting the puck and protecting his own end that I could see a coaching staff say, hey, you know what, dude, we just need you to kind of, keep it clean in our own end and let the forwards do all the work. So you probably see a lot of secondary assists, a lot of, points off of like point shots and breakout passes. So that's why I was a little low on him on the fantasy ranking. But in terms of, ranking overall, I see him being a number 1 on an NHL team. Even similarities to similarities to Jacob Chikrin, who a lot of people were down on in his draft season, and now he's really like the number 1 on Phoenix or Arizona and really blossoming before our eyes. So I think Lambos, you'll see him become a similar type of player.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a great example of the difference between an NHL draft board and then applying that to your fantasy rankings draft board, the difference between the two. And some guys move up and some guys move down. The guys that move up, sometimes there's a risk that they have a better skill set or offensive upside, but how much ice time they get is a huge factor, right? They've got holes in their game that are keeping them down on the NHL draft board, but maybe they don't skate very well, or maybe they don't back check too hard, or they're a little bit Alexei Kovalev and they mail it in for a game or two and don't do anything. So those guys would be hard pressed to get some ice time. But then you got guys like this who, maybe don't have the same sort of offensive upside. Like Jacob Chikrin is good offensively, but he's no Cale Makar, right? Yeah. But I mean, he gets all the ice time he can handle, and it's hard not to produce some kind of points when you're playing over 20 minutes a game, right? It might not be power play goals all the time, but if you're on the ice, you're blocking shots and you're going to pick up some assists and points by default just from passing the puck up to your forwards and letting them do the scoring.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that he would be devoid of fantasy value, but in a fantasy draft, he moves down a little bit. I got a couple more guys I could talk about, but do you have any one or two players who you thought were interesting if you saw the overall rankings? So we went through the top 10. After that, it goes Simon Edmondson, Cole Sillinger, Chaz Lucius, Carson Lambos, Simon Robertson, Brendan Othman, Oscar Olesen, Xavier Bourgal, and Mason McTavish, and then Sasha Pastujov. Mason McTavish is a player who I think is ranked too low on both NHL draft boards and the fantasy one. I think he might be the hardest hit player for COVID, that he didn't play for a long time. Any of those guys jump out at you to guys who you thought would maybe be a little bit higher on the fantasy ranking?
Well, two guys I'll touch on. One being one guy that I was higher on that was a little bit lower, but not that much. And that was Cole Sillinger. And, he's Mike Sillinger's kid. Mike Sillinger was a first-round pick of the Red Wings back in '89, played on like 15 NHL teams, kind of a journeyman, but he was still a good NHL player. But Cole is a bit of a different player. He's a big, mean, physical, nasty, in-your-face winger. And so what happened with Cole was he was playing in the WHL last season. And was it Moose Jaw? I think he was playing for Moose Jaw, but Medicine Hat or Moose Jaw. I think it was Medicine Hat. But he was playing for Medicine Hat last year, and he was pretty good. He was one of the top young players on that team. And then obviously because of COVID, it got shut down. He was not playing and then decided to go to the USHL. So it's a great example or a great opportunity for us to finally see, all right, well, let's see who's better. The Canadian Major Junior, the US, because, the USHL has been out drafting the OHL the last couple of years. And by that, the other Canadian junior leagues. So it's been a little bit of a competition now between the Americans and the Canadians over who's developing the better talent when it comes to the draft. So when I saw that he was going to go to Sioux Falls in the USHL, I'm like, all right. USHL is definitely a more defense-oriented league, kind of like the similar situation like the WHL, where out of the three major junior leagues, we consider the Dub to be the tougher one to score in. This freaking kid goes to the USHL and just annihilates it. He annihilates it. It's kind of sad. It's unfortunate for the USHL competition because he's just toying with them. He's only played in about, I think, 20 games. But in those 20 games, he was already, I think, third or fourth in the league in scoring and points per game. And all the guys ahead of him were on that Chicago loaded team with all these first-round picks or potential first-round picks. That team averages like 6 goals a game. So in a way, I think it's more impressive for Sillinger to be a top point producer on a team like Sioux Falls than it would be if he played for a team like, let's say, Chicago, where everybody knows how to score. But on top of that, his shots. I mean, he's had games. He's averaging like almost 5 shots a game or 4.5 shots a game, which is very difficult to do in the USHL. And there was one game where he had 10 shots. So think about it. You got a two-way physical bruising winger type who could score. He could be a playmaker. He's got a great intensity. He's got the NHL bloodlines. And oh, by the way, if he wants to, he could just shoot the puck at will and beef up his totals. So one of the more complete players you'll find in this draft. He's a throwback. I love the kid's game immensely, and I got him ranked in my top 10 overall. So I think I had him ranked 7th in the fantasy ranking. I just think that when you offer so many different looks from one position, the left wing position, where he could beat you in so many ways, that's when the points and the shots are going to start piling up. The other guy is Edmondson. Now, let me tell you about Simon Edmondson. I want to make it clear. I'm not going to use this as a soapbox, but I am going to use the opportunity or take the opportunity to explain myself because Simon Edmondson has been considered a potential number 1 overall pick. I've even seen NHL Central Scouting go as far as to compare him to Victor Hedman, which I thought was a little premature. But Edmondson is a big, lanky, puck-moving defenseman. He plays for Frölunda in the Swedish Hockey League. Now he's with Västerås in the Allsvenskan, the middle-tier league. And this kid has all the makings, all the potential in the world to be a number 1 defenseman in the NHL. He could put up a lot of points. He's a power play quarterback. He loves to hammer the puck. The thing about Edmondson, though, is that his decision-making is very suspect. Now, it's not sloppy. It's just, it seems like there's a lot of selfishness in his game. He makes decisions not really for the sake of the team, but for himself. And by that, I'm saying that he's going to take the puck and do a 1-on-4, right? He's going to take the puck by himself up the ice. He's going to look beautiful skating with it through the zone. And once he gets to the line, there's 4 people in front of him. He's going to try to skate right through them. Now, that might work in the J20. It might work maybe even in the national tournaments, but that's not going to work in the NHL. And he keeps trying to do it. You watch him play where it's like he'll have such a great start and he'll be, dishing the puck out with authority, an outstanding breakout passer. And he'll have such a solid opening to his game, and then the bad decisions start coming, okay? The overcommitments, the over-aggressiveness. And I don't mean over-aggressiveness like, I'm going to pinch, and eventually I'll get caught. I'm talking about, putting himself in positions where he's not needed, going after the puck when he doesn't have it, when he needs to basically space himself out. He doesn't understand the concept of puck support, where, if your forward's carrying the puck up ice, you got to maybe create a little bit of separation so you're not all boxed in together. He could be undisciplined at times, tries to be overly fancy and flashy when there's absolutely no need for him to be flashy, and it leads to turnovers. And this was all documented. I mean, I got volumes on this kid, and I feel bad because it looks like I'm targeting him, and it's like a smear campaign. But I have to, I keep watching him to see if I'm wrong. And every time I watch him, I come away with negative notes on him. And I try to be positive. So with him, when you're drafting first overall, I don't care if it's a fantasy draft or an NHL draft, you want assurances. You want, you definitely want comfort. You don't want to take a risk on a first overall pick. You don't want to base now, as far as the comparisons with Victor Hedman in his draft year was the number 1 on Modo, which was a powerhouse team. He was playing 24 to 25 minutes a game. It's almost like, he was like their Ray Bork, or he was their, Drew Doughty, or he was their Cale Makar, right? And Edmondson, they tried to play him with the SHL team, and he was playing like 2 to 4 minutes a game, if he was even playing. And then they finally sent him down to the Allsvenskan, and now he's with Västerås, and he's the number 4 there on an average mediocre team, and he's playing about 15 minutes a game. So I don't know where the scouting community gets the Victor Hedman comparison, aside from the fact that he's big, mobile, and Swedish. He's big, mobile, and Swedish, and a little bit of creativity, and there is some flair. But Hedman was a guy that we knew at worst would be a really good defensive guy in his own end, and maybe not put up a whole lot of points. With Edmondson, I don't know if he's going to have to unlearn a lot of issues, and that's why I have him ranked really low in my main rankings. I have him ranked in like the 20s, and I can't see. You look at from like a shot generation standpoint. When Edmondson played for the J20 team in Frölunda, that powerhouse team when we talked about Lyselle, Edmondson was supposed to be their number 1. And he didn't play like a number 1. He was there for about, I want to say about 15 games. He had about maybe 5 or 6 points in those 15 games. This is a team that was averaging 6 goals a game, by the way. He only had about 5 or 6 points in those 15 games and had 28 shots. So about, 2 shots a game. Whereas the other defensemen on the team, they had a couple of defensemen who were averaging higher than that. So, they had one defenseman who was averaging 3 shots a game. So I'm wondering, all right, you're going to call this guy number 1. You're going to call him a franchise guy. Well, why? Well, what are we basing it off of? What are we basing? It was an international tournament that happened a year and a half ago where he was, in fact, really good at that World U17 Hockey Challenge. He had a recent U18 versus U19 game with Sweden. It was the Team U18 versus Team U19. And same issues where, with him, though, you get a lot of power play time. You probably get a lot of shots. But the point production, maybe at most 30, 40 points a season in the NHL if he makes it. I don't know. First overall pick to me is a big deal. You need to check every single block and not have any red flags, and he's got a bunch. So that's why I would say, kind of be cautious with the way that people assess him.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at him as first overall in the fantasy ranking. That's for sure. This is a weird draft. Right off the top, we talked about it, and I'm trying to come up with a number that I think is a consensus where everyone has these X number of players in the top of their draft, and it's like 4. Clark, Power, Hughes, Eklund, Beniers, maybe like 5. I'm looking at the consensus rankings on Elite Prospects right now, and they've got Simon Edmondson at 5th and Dylan Gunther at 12th. And a lot of people are saying Gunther should be he's a potential number 1. So, I don't know who contributes to the Elite Prospects consensus rankings, but it's kind of all over the map compared to what I'm looking at for the fantasy ranking. And when I look at a couple of my more trusted rankings, like yours, the Dobber Prospects, hockeyprospect.com, Bob McKenzie's, even amongst those guys, there's some players who have wide ranges and disparities, more so this year than any other year I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like a couple of players who people just can't agree on. And there's always a draft that has 1 or 2 of those guys that it's just like, he's ranked 5th on one guy's list and in the second round in another guy's list. This year's draft, it's almost the opposite, where you've got a couple of guys who people are saying, yeah, he could go first. And then everyone else is a total crapshoot.
Yeah.
Fascinating draft year. We've got some road to go before all the games are played, and who knows what the NHL draft is even going to be this year, if they're going to have a draft or if they're just going to lump 2 years together. There's been a little bit of conversation about that. I think that if the NHL was going to do that, they would have made that decision by now. I'm pretty confident there will be a 21 draft. I don't think it'll be a live draft again. I think we'll have, like we had with 2020, it'll be another online sort of style draft where the players are zoomed in from their home when they're selected, which is unfortunate, right? Because especially for a draft like this year's draft class, a lot of these guys, the draft might be the pinnacle of their career. And not being at the NHL draft and being able to go up on stage and have Gary Bettman say, welcome to the NHL, throw that jersey and cap on and put their arm around the GM and director of scouting or whoever and be on stage and do the media tour that follows. Like, that weekend is a pretty special moment for a lot of these players' careers. And in some cases, it's as good as it's ever going to get for them. So I hope that these players aren't denied that opportunity and they get that chance.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Nothing is standard anymore. So I think the big thing that we're waiting for right now is for the OHL. Once the OHL can figure out and just give a definitive answer, that'll help the process go through. So even if look at the Dub, they're only going to do 24 games, but you know what? They'll have a postseason, so they add another 10 to 15 games for most of these top prospects. That should be plenty of time. 30, 35 games should be enough of a sample for a scouting staff to combine with their notes from previous years, right? Because we watched the kids last year. All these games are archived on video. They could do all the interviews. The scouts have access to all these kids. They could talk to the coaches. They could talk to the opposing coaches. So, Steve Yzerman went public about a month ago saying, our guys need more time. Well, what does that mean, you guys need more time? That's ridiculous. Because I already have notes on over 500-600 kids. You know what I mean? From
it's a level playing field. Everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the OHL is the big one. There's probably a concern that it's not fair for these OHL and WHL kids to not get drafted. But then what about the other 80% of the kids that make up a given draft class, draft year? So we'll see. I think it would be completely, I guess it would be unprecedented if they had like 2 drafts in one weekend or 1 week, from one year to the next. It'd be pretty crazy. So I don't know how they'll do that.
Or they move the draft age to 19 and just throw them all in the same pool as the 22
just
guys.
For the 1 year, just for the 1 year.
Or going forward. There's been
going forward,
the scouting community talks about whether or not the NHL draft should be at 18 years old or 19. I don't agree with that. I think the trickle down effect on that, is pretty significant. That'll affect every other league below the NHL if they change their draft age. And as far as the OHL goes, by mid-February, I was pretty bleak on the assumption that the OHL, it ain't happening. They're not going to have a league. Like, I don't know what the holdup is. The NHL is playing games in Ontario. The AHL has agreed to come back, and so we'll have games in Ontario in the AHL. So I don't know what the holdup is with the OHL, and then leagues below that are playing. So, like, why isn't the OHL getting it together? And then the league, a few weeks after that, made an announcement, like late February, early March, had an announcement that they were not canceling the season, and that, basically hinting that we had some irons in the fire for how we're going to do it. Later that afternoon, Scott Wheeler put out a tweet saying that it was looking at having a couple of hub cities that they would play in, and having like you said, like a 20-game sort of template for a season, and then that would allow the CHL to have playoffs and hopefully a Memorial Cup.
Yeah,
haven't really heard anything on that, and we're running out of road here, running out of runway. I don't know if they have any problems with playing through the summer and not really having much of an off season before they start the 21-22 season, but who knows what's going to happen here. A lot of talk about vaccines coming out now, and timelines with those seem to be getting faster and faster and more optimistic, and the whole situation changes on a daily basis. So I really hope that the OHL can get everything lined up so that they can have something similar to what we were talking about, a 20-game short season, maybe some hub cities, playoff, and go from there. Steve, thanks so much for coming on and giving me a good chunk of your day today. I really appreciate it. Steve Kournianos is the author of the Draft Analyst podcast. You follow him on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. I love his podcast called the Draft Analyst. It broke out a little bit with your YouTube channel. It's not called the Draft Analyst. I guess that handle was already taken.
Yeah, so it's called Prospect Film Room instead.
There you go.
I used to have the Draft Analyst. I still have a Draft Analyst YouTube channel, but Google gave me too many strikes for I guess when I put the highlights and the videos of games in, it would have like a song in the background. Like in between whistles, they would play a song in the PA system in the arena. Well, if you do that, the YouTube picks up. It's like, oh, you don't have rights to broadcast that song. So I got so many strikes. They basically like just shut down the ability for me to create anymore on that channel. So I created a new one, Prospect Film Room, and that's the one I've been using, where I have all the highlights on it. So podcast, I haven't done a podcast in a long time. I think it's been like 2 months. So I'm going to kick that up soon again.
You and me, bro.
Yeah. It's just been busy, trying to get this stuff knocked out on a daily basis. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk prospects with you. And I think if you're a fan of either whether it's prospects or the draft, you got to listen to Pete and his podcast, and head over to DobberProspects, because really this is the 1 year where we really have no idea. We need as much help as we can. So you got to use the resources that are out there, and Dobber's one of the better ones.
Yeah. Tony does a really good job on his podcast, the Draftcast is what it's called. He certainly puts in way more hours with watching the draft eligible guys. I kind of try to spread it around a little bit and watch some NHL and AHL games as well. So I'm certainly not the same level of draft eligible prospect experts that you and he are, which is why I have guys like you on my podcast. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it. And let's just really all hope, and if you pray, that the NHL has a draft this year, because if they don't, that'll screw up a lot of our fantasy leagues where we trade and have draft picks as commodities. I got 2 coming up in the first round of this draft in one of my leagues. So if the NHL doesn't have a draft, that could really complicate things. And if they do, hopefully it's a live draft, and you and I can get together and have a beer again. I've seen you at a couple of drafts now, and you living in Nashville and me living in Ontario, that's quite a lot of geography between us, but we get together for a draft.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's just hope.
Yeah. All right, Steve. Thanks very much, and we'll get you back on here in the future for another episode.
All right, thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.